So my name is Misty Rojo, and I'm coming here from Oakland, California. And I've come here. I was invited by Survived and Punished and California Coalition for Women Prisoners through work I did with them recently around a particular bill. But the longer story of what's gotten me into this work and what made me want to come to this particular convening of No Perfect Victim is I've began to learn through my own healing and deconstructing not everything that I've done through life is my fault, in terms of having gone to prison, having made quote unquote bad decisions in life. And so I often like to start off in these healing spaces talking about my grandfather, who molested me when I was really, really, really young for some years. And learning at 16, I called him out and I was called a liar. And then a few months later had found out from his son's wife that while it was happening, he had been calling the wife who lived hours away from us, begging her to call my grandmother and call my mother and not have me left there with him. Was basically crying for help and was openly saying what the intentions were. And at first I was really angry, of course, as a teenager. I was really angry and I felt let down and unprotected, and how could they let that happen to me? And then through going to prison, getting involved with groups like California Coalition for Women Prisoners and another similar organization, Justice Now, that I just transitioned out of co-directorship of, taught me about systemic oppression. It gave me language to things that I had experienced and knew weren't all my fault, and that it wasn't always bad choices, and that, your life becomes really restricted and your options for survival become really restricted. And I also, and learned that my grandfather was as much of a victim as I was. I figured out through my own healing and through learning about abolition and learning about all these different social justice frameworks that man was let down as much as I was, and had to learn to see him as a victim as much as I wanted people to see me as a victim when I shot someone. And so I was really drawn to this because there are no perfect victims. There are no good victims, bad victims, and actually a person that can perpetrate harm can be a victim of harm. And so it exists, nothing exists in a silo, nothing exists separately, and to see full humanity and move towards true change, true healing, and treating people truly as human, we need to deconstruct what is victimization, what is violence, what is healing, and who should be held in those spaces, and how to hold them in those spaces. I don't know if I saw I don't know if I saw myself different, but I saw, because I think maybe for the longest I could, and I think this is true for all humans, we want to believe ourselves or the people we love are not like those people. And so it took me a long time to understand when people would I say I'm abolition, what do we do with those people? And then I started to learn, who are those people to you? We all have those people. I had those people, at one time that was my grandfather. So who are those people? Understanding that I am those people to some people, and that what I have done has traumatized and has harmed. And so it really just kind of, it removed the ability to excuse myself as exempt from the human experience. And so, then that means that even someone, if I think they're the most disgusting human, is not exempt from the human experience. And even if they are what I imagine them to be, there's a way that they got there, and hopefully a way to bring them back out, or to hold them safely, humanely, and not allow them to harm themselves or other people. Survived and Punished to me is exactly that. It's the fact that when you come up under certain systems of oppression, either whether it's structural, whether it's interpersonal, whether the violence is structural or the violence is interpersonal. In fact, I think they're very intertwined. I think the structural inequities and oppressions and violences feed the interpersonal in many ways. And so to me, Survived and Punished is exactly that. It's calling out that we have all figured out how to survive through violence, and some people through mechanisms of violence to survive. And instead of acknowledging that there was true help needed and that there was true healing needed, then you just get punished and you're further criminalized, and then you're effectively denied healing. And that is the biggest thing. It's not even, it is horrible to cage, but it's the idea that you no longer deserve to be treated with kindness and with dignity, and you no longer deserve healing. And so, yeah, to me, survived and punished is calling out that we are all victims, and we are all worth healing. It's always interesting because, we're always taught lived experience, direct lived experience, that's what we honor. But when it comes down to it, everybody has a different experience and everybody has a different answer to how to address how they experienced inequity or injustice. And so that is a truth. I can sit here and say, I do not believe in caging people. Well, someone else is like, that man should have been in prison, not me. And so it's really kind of deepening those conversations, and it's an opportunity. There's times I even today I've heard things that I might have like inwardly cringed a bit, but I have to remember people's experiences are different. The frameworks that they have and what they know or believe is justice are different, and so all of that frames how people respond and react and envision what justice looks like for them. And so I think that is that's one thing to navigate and create balance around, is that understanding that my dream of no prisons and someone's dream of prisons for particular people, they coexist, and how do we find a similar value line to work together to at least stop criminalizing people who shouldn't be criminalized. Like we were talking about transformative justice, someone said, no, it's not perfect and it doesn't work all the time. And no, that's true. But I do believe there is a value in treating a person who has caused harm very similarly to a person who has experienced the harm. Because as I explained, like if you think when a person causes harm, they're not internalizing their own trauma from that interaction. There's a trauma that it gets impacted when you cause harm. It's kind of hard to explain, but you become impacted by that as well. And so I would love to see more done in that space, and I would love to see more held by people who have gone through that process of like identifying themselves as perpetrators of harm and also make it a much less stigmatized conversation. So yeah, I would love for there to be a hotline for someone to go, I feel like touching a 6-year-old. There should be that. If there's not that, guess what's gonna happen? And then I also had an epiphany, my own dream the other day. I remembered when I woke up in a prison cell, and I remember how safe I felt because my husband couldn't get to me. And I knew I was in big trouble and all these other things spinning in my head, but my husband couldn't get to me. And then I was like, if I could reimagine prisons, they're impenetrable places. The one I was in has 8 in a room. Why not remove someone who's been harmed with their small support community into a place like that where the perpetrator cannot get in? I want to repurpose prisons for that. I want to give them to people that need healing and their small community where the wall is literally, but it's not in the same way where you're disjointed and pulled out of society for long periods of time, but it does have this physical security that you could put a small group of people to allow that healing. So that's just one of my small abolition dreams of repurposing prison spaces and how to make them more usable and healing. During my incarceration was definitely like California Coalition for Women Prisoners and Justice Now, like coming in and helping me maintain contact with my children was the biggest one. Navigating medical care was another. But since coming home, figuring out that there are networks out there, like there are alternatives and communities that are coming together. And so I think that's the biggest thing I've taken away from this, is to hear the different spaces people operate in and how do we link together. I think someone said it in one of my breakout sessions about, instead of like looking at people for having a different skill set or different approach and being kind of separated about it, but how do we link that in? And how do we pull those connections in closer? Last year, met someone, dated them for a very short period of time, and started seeing a lot of weird things, cut it off, and they went completely crazy. Obviously, the signs were right. They put me on Craigslist. Yeah, it was really, really bad. But I was lucky, and like because I've been in this work, because I've been looking at this, because we talk about this, because we talk about alternatives, I was able to have a network of places to go. I was out of work for a week but still paid. I was able to, safely get to the phone carrier to get my phone number changed because I had to go in person. I had a support system to go into court with, and I shared that. It was kind of horrible to sit there. I have a support system. I have all my stuff together. I have a 30-page petition for a restraining order. And I watched mostly women of color in front of me go time and time again, alone, scared, no language, no context, no real way to navigate, and just kind of be denied time and time again. And then there I go with all of my privilege, all of my experience, all of my knowledge, 5-year restraining order, $700 award for missed work. And it was like, it didn't feel that good. It didn't, because you know where it comes from and where it moves from. It was really eye-opening to be back in that space that I had been in my early 20s before going to prison or learning any of these things, and then to walk back in and see the stark difference of when you do have community and you do have support and you do know how to navigate these things better and you've given more thought. So yeah, it's we need to figure out how to make these conversations more organic and more accessible to the people that need them the most. Because yeah, all of those women should have been just as supported as I was, probably more so. Well, I mean, it definitely sparks a conversation, obviously. I think continuing to highlight individual cases, because I know I keep hearing in that room over and over all the names that don't get said, all the names that don't get said, and I absolutely agree. But we have to say some names. I was in Jacksonville for Marissa, for the Standing Our Ground conference for Marissa Alexander. So that's the importance. Like, heard Marissa Alexander's name way back when it first started, to be pulled into that, to be pulled here, to meet her, that's why it's necessary, because no, Marissa's not every single person who's not named, but because of her, because of Brescia, like we can start calling out, look what happened to Brescia, she was a juvenile. Like it starts the conversations, and the more names we say, the more individuals we get behind, the less of an individual problem this becomes. So there's definitely validity in naming that. Someone finding me randomly in a prison of 4,000 something women, I've been able to change 3 laws in 4 years. It's needed. You have to start somewhere. We can't, if we were to list everybody's name, it'd be too overwhelming. Nobody would want to hear it. So yeah, it takes 1 or 2 to get the ball rolling and start pulling out and seeing that it may be an individual name, but it's not an individual problem. It was really amazing to come into a space and see people that I've known for years that do different, pockets of work in the social justice area, to see new people, and to always be reminded that we're everywhere. There's people like me that are resistors. There are people that are in these very mainstream systems looking for ways to help and looking for ways to create change from within. So it's always, coming here and being able to see old folks, meet new folks, and remember that we're all in this struggle together, and that again, not individual, that this is a collective, there is a collective pushing towards change. And so it can feel very isolating and lonely and feels like we're losing a lot. So these gatherings are reminders that sometimes resistance and winning is simply gathering.